My name is Isabella. Most people call me Bella, and if you'd met me a few years ago, you'd never believe I'd become the woman I am today. Back then, I was the quiet one in the family, the peacemaker, the fixer, the one who believed that if I just loved enough, things would work out. I used to think family meant unconditional love. I was wrong. It started the year my sister, Clarissa, got engaged. Everyone in my family was ecstatic. My parents threw dinner parties, sent invitations to every distant cousin we had, and posted constant updates online. I helped pick her dress, planned her bridal shower, and even designed her wedding website. I was genuinely happy for her. But as the months passed, something shifted. Clarissa became distant. Calls went unanswered, texts left unread. I thought she was just busy with wedding stress. Until one afternoon, I opened Instagram and saw her post. Can't wait to celebrate with everyone we love this weekend. Everyone except me. There was no invitation in my mailbox, no call, no explanation. Just silence. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe the mail got lost. Maybe they'd surprise me later. But when my aunt sent me a group picture of the rehearsal dinner, and I saw my entire family there, my heart cracked open. They didn't forget me, they excluded me. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone, waiting for someone to explain, but no one did. Not my parents. Not my sister. Not even my brother, who'd always defended me before. That night, I cried quietly. Not the kind of tears that seek attention, the kind that burn. The next morning, I called my mom. My voice trembled, but I forced it out. "Mom, I didn't get an invitation. Did something happen?" Her reply was calm, too calm. "Oh, Bella, your sister thought it'd be best if you didn't come. It's her day, and she didn't want any drama." Drama. I hadn't argued with anyone. I hadn't done anything. I had spent months helping Clarissa prepare, but somehow I'd become the problem. I asked why, desperate, trembling, and she sighed like I was exhausting her. "Sweetheart, not everything is about you. You've been sensitive lately, and Clarissa just wants a peaceful wedding." Sensitive. That word echoed in my head for days. When I hung up, I realized something painful. They didn't see me as part of the family anymore. I was the outsider, the emotional one, the burden. So I did something I'd never done before. I packed a suitcase, booked a ticket, and left. No note, no call, no explanation. If they could erase me, I could disappear properly. I flew to Lisbon, somewhere I'd always dreamed of going alone. For the first time in my life, I stopped begging to be included. That week, while my sister got married surrounded by flashing cameras and smiling relatives, I walked along cobblestone streets by the sea, tasting pastel de nata and watching sunsets without pretending to be fine. Somewhere between the waves and the quiet cafes, something inside me started to heal. I didn't know it then, but that trip would change everything. It would become the beginning of my revenge, not through anger, but through evolution. When I returned home a month later, I was different, calmer, grounded, and strangely free. I'd learned to stop chasing explanations from people who were comfortable hurting me. I started working harder at my job, long hours, relentless focus. It was the only thing I could control. My boss noticed, promoted me twice in 1 year, and I began consulting for a major firm overseas. Meanwhile, my family's life, the one I'd once envied, started to unravel. I didn't plan it. I didn't even know at first. It began with Clarissa's husband losing his job. Then rumors spread that they'd overspent on the wedding and gone into debt. My parents tried to help financially, but their business started struggling too. I found out when my brother texted me, "Hey, just checking in. Things are rough here." I almost replied immediately, instinctively, but then I paused. They hadn't checked on me when I was broken. Now I owed them nothing.
So I didn't reply.
Weeks later, I heard through a mutual friend that my parents had mortgaged their house to cover Clarissa's wedding debts. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd excluded me for peace, and now their peace was gone. But revenge, I realized, doesn't always look like payback. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's success. Months passed. I moved into a new apartment with ocean views, started painting again, and built a small online store that quickly grew into something real. I posted one picture of my new studio, just one, and that's all it took. My sister messaged me for the first time in almost 2 years. "Hey Bella, long time no talk."
How are you?
Smiley face. I stared at the message for a long time. My heart wanted to reply, but my mind remembered the girl who cried alone the night of her wedding. So I answered simply, "I'm doing well, Clarissa. Hope you're okay." She replied, "Yeah, actually not really. We've been struggling a bit financially. Could you maybe lend us some money just for a few months? I'd pay you back soon, promise." I smiled sadly. Karma wasn't a storm. It was a mirror. I stared at her message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't type. I could almost hear my mother's voice behind it, the same tone she used when she wanted something but didn't want to ask directly. For years, they'd all depended on me, emotionally, financially, silently. And I'd always given, because that's what love meant to me. But now, I'd learned something different. Love without respect is just manipulation dressed as care. That night, I sat by my window, the sea whispering outside, and thought about everything I'd been through. How they'd erased me from the most important day of their lives. How they'd called me dramatic for feeling pain. And now, when their world was collapsing, they remembered my name. I typed slowly. "Clarissa, I'm sorry you're going through a hard time, but I can't help you financially. I hope things work out." Her reply came minutes later. "Wow. Seriously? After everything I've done for you?" I almost laughed. After everything she had done? I didn't answer. The next morning, my mother called. Her tone was cold. "Isabella, your sister told me you refused to help. Is that true?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Do you realize how selfish that sounds? We're family. Family helps each other." I took a deep breath. Did family help me when I needed it? Silence. Then she said softly, "That was different." "No," I whispered. "That was the lesson." Weeks passed. I tried to move on, but guilt still crept in sometimes, like a ghost I couldn't fully exorcise. I'd spent so many years defining myself by what others thought of me, that standing firm now felt almost unnatural. Then one evening I got another call, this time from my father. His voice was tired, older somehow. "Bella, your mother's worried. We know things weren't handled well in the past, but can't we move on? Clarissa's having a baby soon." A baby? That word hit me like a wave. I didn't even know she was pregnant. He continued, "She's stressed, and we thought maybe you could come visit. She could use your support." Support. Not love. Not reconciliation. Support. Still, a part of me wanted to go, to see if maybe, just maybe, time had softened them. So I agreed. I booked a ticket, bought a small gift for the baby, and flew home. When I arrived, Clarissa opened the door. She looked pale, thinner than I remembered, her smile forced. "Hey, it's been a while." Her husband barely looked up from his phone. The house felt smaller, colder, like all the love had leaked out over the years. Dinner was awkward. My mother talked about how life teaches lessons, and my father nodded in silence. I smiled politely, but inside, I felt miles away. Later that night, as Clarissa showed me the nursery, she finally broke down. "I know I hurt you," she whispered, "but I was jealous, okay? You were always so perfect in their eyes. I wanted one thing that was just mine." Her honesty stunned me. I placed my hand on her shoulder. "You didn't have to erase me to shine, Clarissa." She cried, quietly, genuinely. And for the first time in years, I saw my sister again, not the rival, not the stranger, but the girl I used to build pillow forts with. Over the next few days, something inside me softened. I helped her set up the nursery, made her tea, listened to her worries. But I didn't let my boundaries fall. Forgiveness, I'd learned, doesn't mean reunion. It means peace. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch, she said, "You've changed. You're calm. I used to think you'd fall apart without us." I smiled gently. I did fall apart, but then I learned how to build something stronger. Her husband eventually lost his patience with my presence. "You think you're better than us now?" he snapped one evening after dinner. I looked at him steadily. "No."
I just stopped trying to be less.
He left the room muttering. Clarissa apologized again. That night, as I lay in the guest room, I realized something powerful. Revenge wasn't about seeing them suffer. It was about living in such peace that their chaos couldn't touch me anymore. When I left 2 days later, Clarissa hugged me tightly. "I'll call you," she said. I nodded, but deep down, I knew she probably wouldn't, not yet. Healing takes time, and honesty takes courage. As my plane lifted into the sky, I looked down at the fading city lights and whispered to myself, sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming who they said you never could. Months passed again. Life felt steady, whole. My business flourished, and my art was featured in a small gallery exhibition. One evening, as I stood in front of my paintings, I realized how far I'd come, from crying over an invitation to being the kind of woman who no longer needed one. Then, one morning, I got a message, not from Clarissa but from my mother. "Your father's in the hospital. Heart attack. Please come." My world tilted again. I flew home immediately, my chest heavy with memories. When I walked into the sterile room, my father looked fragile, hooked to machines. My mother sat beside him, silent. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know who else to call," she whispered. And in that moment, all the anger I'd carried for years melted away. Because love, even when bruised, still finds its way home. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and fading flowers. I could hear the soft beeping of the heart monitor syncing with my own anxious pulse. My father's eyes fluttered open when he heard my voice. For a moment, he looked confused. Then, recognition softened his face. "Isabella," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You came." "I did," I said quietly, sitting beside him. "You scared us." He smiled weakly. "I didn't think you'd want to see me again." "I didn't think so either," I admitted, and we both let out a small, tired laugh, the kind that carries more truth than humor. He stared at the ceiling. "I made a lot of mistakes. I thought I was teaching you to be strong, but I was just being cruel." Tears filled my eyes. I'd waited years to hear those words, and yet, when they came, they didn't feel like victory. They felt like closure. "I survived anyway," I said softly. He turned his head toward me, eyes glistening. "You did more than that. You became someone I barely recognize in the best way." My mother sat silently in the corner, her hands shaking as she held her rosary. I caught her gaze for a moment. She looked away, ashamed. When visiting hours ended, I kissed his forehead. "Rest, Dad. I'll be here tomorrow." As I walked out of the hospital that night, the air was cold, sharp against my skin, grounding me in the present. The girl who once begged for love had learned to stand alone, and now, the world was bending toward her peace. The next morning, I brought breakfast for my mother. She looked surprised but didn't speak at first. We sat in silence, eating in small bites, the air thick with unsaid things. Finally, she whispered, "I was wrong too." I looked up. "I thought controlling you meant protecting you. But all I did was drive you away. When you stopped calling, it broke me." Her voice cracked, and I saw the years of pride and pain unravel at once.
For a long time, I didn't know what to say.
Then, gently, I reached across the table and held her hand. "Mom, I spent years trying to be who you wanted. Then I spent more years being angry that I couldn't. I'm tired. I just want peace." Her eyes welled up. "So do I." In that fragile moment, the war between us ended, not with apologies shouted or tears begged, but with two tired women realizing neither had really won. We went back into my father's room together. He was sleeping peacefully, his chest rising slowly. For the first time in years, we stood side by side, without walls between us. That night, I stayed at their house. It felt strange. The same rooms, the same smell of old furniture and lavender detergent, but something was different. I wasn't a child begging for love anymore. I was a woman who had learned that forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was freedom. Days turned into weeks. My father recovered slowly, and I began visiting more often. Clarissa came around too, her belly now round and glowing with life. Our conversations were easier, small steps, careful laughter, a shared tenderness we hadn't known how to express before. Then one morning, my mother called, panicked. It's happening. Clarissa's water broke. We rushed to the hospital. Hours later, when I held my niece for the first time, something inside me healed completely. The baby's tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I felt the full circle of everything: pain, rejection, forgiveness, rebirth. Clarissa looked up at me with tired eyes. I named her Hope, she said softly. I smiled. It suits her. In that moment, I realized that life had given me exactly what I needed: not revenge, not justice, but peace. The kind that grows quietly in the ruins of anger. That night, as I walked outside the hospital, the world felt alive again. The moon hung low, the wind brushed against my hair, and I whispered to myself, maybe some endings are really beginnings wearing different clothes. Months later, my art exhibition expanded internationally. I was invited to Paris for a collaboration, the dream I'd once thought I'd never reach. Before boarding my flight, I visited my parents one last time. My father was in the garden, tending to his plants. My mother was humming softly as she folded laundry. He looked up and smiled. So, my little wanderer's off again? I laughed. Not so little anymore. He chuckled.
No.
You grew up beautifully, despite us. I hugged them both. For the first time in my life, it wasn't a goodbye heavy with guilt, it was gratitude. As the plane took off, I looked out the window at the clouds below and felt a calm certainty settle inside me. Revenge had never been my story. Healing was. And that was far more powerful. Paris greeted me with cold rain and the smell of fresh bread, the kind of poetic contrast life always seemed to hand me, beauty mixed with melancholy. I rented a small apartment near Montmartre, filled it with second-hand furniture, and turned the living room into my studio. My art was finally being seen. Galleries called, collectors emailed, and exhibitions booked months ahead. But even amid the success, there were nights I stood by the window, sipping tea, thinking of home. Not out of longing, but reflection. Sometimes healing means revisiting memories until they no longer sting. One evening, I received a message from my mother. Your father fell again. He's fine now, but he misses you. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I called. His voice on the other end was fragile. You're so far away, Bella. I know, I said softly, but you're still close. He chuckled weakly. You used to run from us. Now I wish I could run to you. After we hung up, I stared at my half-finished canvas. I realized something. Sometimes life gives us new beginnings not because we deserve them, but because we survived long enough to earn them. A year later, I returned home for a short visit. Everything looked smaller. The streets, the house, even the ghosts. My parents greeted me at the airport, older now, slower. We hugged without words. Sometimes silence says everything. At dinner, my father placed an envelope on the table. It's for you, he said. Inside was a small deed to the house. We're signing it over. You built your life without us. This is our way to make peace. Tears welled in my eyes. Dad, you don't have to. He raised a hand. Let me do this for my peace. That night, I walked through the old house, touching the walls that once echoed with shouting and slammed doors. Now they held only quiet. Forgiveness had remodeled more than I ever could. Life flowed gently after that. I spent summers home, winters in Europe. My art grew deeper, inspired by everything I'd lived through. Critics called it hauntingly human. But one morning, I received a letter that shook me. It was from Clarissa. Isabella, Mom and Dad are in trouble. Dad's company was sued. They might lose everything. They don't want to tell you because they're ashamed. I read it twice, then slowly folded it shut. For years, I'd imagined revenge like this, poetic justice, the universe balancing its scales. But standing there, letter in hand, all I felt was sadness. The next day, I wired them money quietly, enough to save their home. I didn't call, I didn't ask for thanks. I simply chose peace again because real revenge is watching those who hurt you finally understand your worth. Months later, my mother called, crying, "You saved us, Bella. We didn't deserve your kindness." I smiled faintly. Maybe not. But I needed to do it for me. She sobbed quietly, then whispered, "You've become everything we tried to stop you from being: strong, kind, free." That night, I walked along the Seine, the city lights shimmering across the water. My reflection looked peaceful, content, but beneath that calm was a woman who had rebuilt herself from ashes. I sent a photo of the view to my mother. She replied, "Your father framed your paintings in the living room. He says they make the house feel alive." I stared at the message. Tears stung my eyes, not from pain this time, but release. Years later, when my father passed, I returned home again. The funeral was quiet, simple. Clarissa stood beside me, holding Hope's tiny hand. My mother looked fragile, smaller than I remembered. After everyone left, I stood by his grave. "You did your best," I whispered. "And I did mine." The wind moved gently through the trees, and for a moment, I swear I felt his warmth again. Not as the man who hurt me, but as the father who finally understood. Later that night, my mother handed me a box. Inside were old sketches, my childhood drawings she'd secretly kept. "I thought you should have them back," she said. I smiled. "Thank you." It was strange how grief could coexist with peace. How loss could feel like completion. A few months later, my art was featured in a New York exhibition titled Inheritance. One of the pieces was a painting of my family table, half in shadow, half in light. People stood for long minutes, staring, moved without knowing why. During the opening speech, I said, "This work is about forgiveness, not as surrender, but as strength. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that pain tried to erase." After the applause, a journalist asked, "Do you believe in revenge?" I smiled. "Yes," I said, "but not the kind that destroys others. The kind that rebuilds you so beautifully they can't believe it's the same person they once broke." After the exhibition, my inbox filled with messages from strangers, people who saw themselves in my story. Women wrote about their families, their heartbreaks, their own small rebellions. Some said my paintings made them cry. Others said they gave them courage. One message stood out. "Your work saved me. I was about to give up on everything. Then I saw how you turned pain into color." I sat at my desk, tears streaming silently. For years, I'd believed my suffering was meaningless. Now it was touching lives. That realization became the quietest, most powerful revenge, turning the cruelty I endured into light for others. Later that week, a small museum in Italy offered to host a retrospective of my work. I accepted, not for the fame, but for the story it told. As I prepared my pieces for shipment, I found one last unfinished canvas from years ago, the one I'd started the night my father first told me I'd never make it. I finished it in a single sitting. Each brushstroke felt like forgiveness, each color a goodbye. Back home, my mother called one morning, her voice lighter than I'd heard in years. "I've started volunteering," she said, "at a shelter for young girls. They remind me of you, lost, but strong." I smiled. "That's beautiful, Mom." She paused, her tone softening. "You taught me something I should have known long ago. Love doesn't control, it frees." For the first time in my life, I heard my mother say she was proud of me. That night, I stood on my Paris balcony, watching the city lights ripple across the rooftops. My heart felt whole. Not perfect, but whole. The kind of peace that doesn't erase scars, just makes them part of your beauty. I whispered to the stars, "I did it, Dad. I became the woman you never believed I could be." The wind answered softly, as if it agreed. A few months later, Clarissa and Hope visited Paris. Hope was older now, curious, bright-eyed. She walked into my studio and gasped at the colors. "Aunt Bella, did you paint all this?" I nodded. She smiled. "When I grow up, I want to paint too." Something inside me swelled. Maybe this was legacy. Not the fame, not the success, but inspiring someone to create from their own truth. That evening, Clarissa and I sat by the window drinking tea. She said, "You know, Mom keeps talking about you. She shows everyone your articles. You're her redemption story, Bella." I laughed. "She's mine too." We clinked our cups gently, a quiet toast to the kind of peace that takes years to earn. One day, an unexpected letter arrived. It was from an old family friend, Mr. Cooper, who'd once worked for my father's company. "Your father left something behind for you," the letter read. A journal he kept during his final year. Curious, I asked him to send it. When it arrived, I sat in my studio surrounded by unfinished canvases and opened it carefully. The pages were filled with shaky handwriting, apologies, memories, reflections. One line stopped me cold. "If she ever reads this, tell her. Her silence was my punishment. Her peace was my lesson." I closed the journal and cried, not from sorrow, but from understanding. My father's last gift wasn't money or land. It was awareness. And that, in its own way, was the completion of everything. Years went by. My exhibitions expanded across continents, from Rome to Tokyo to New York. Each city left its mark on me. Each audience felt like a mirror reflecting back what I'd become. But no matter where I went, I carried home in my heart, not as a wound, but as a compass. One afternoon, I received a message from Hope, now a teenager. "Aunt Bella, I got accepted into art school." I grinned, tears of joy filling my eyes. "That's incredible, sweetheart," I replied. "Make art that tells the truth, even when it hurts." As I sent the message, I realized how far I'd come, from the girl who begged for validation to the woman who now gave it freely. When my mother passed, I flew home again. This time, the grief was gentle, like a tide that carried memories instead of regrets. At the funeral, people came up to me, sharing stories of her kindness. How she helped girls rebuild their lives, how she spoke of forgiveness often. Later, when I sorted through her things, I found one of my paintings hung above her bed, the girl by the window. The same one I'd painted during my darkest days. On the back, she'd written in neat handwriting, "Forgiveness gave me back my daughter." I pressed my hand to the canvas, tears streaming silently. In that moment I knew love had won. Years later, I stood in front of a class of young artists. My hair had streaks of silver now, but my spirit felt light. "Art," I told them, "isn't about perfection. It's about truth. The brush doesn't lie. And neither should you." A girl in the front row raised her hand. "How do you paint pain without drowning in it?" I smiled gently. "You don't drown. You learn to breathe underwater." The class fell silent. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows, the same rain that once fell on a broken girl's dreams. But now it felt like applause from the universe. After class ended, I packed my brushes, the scent of turpentine and wet paint lingering in the air, and just as I was locking the studio door, I saw a figure standing by the hallway window. For a moment, I thought it was just a student waiting for feedback, but when he turned, my breath caught Noah. He looked older, tired, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous smile that didn't quite reach them. "Ellie," he said quietly, "you look different." I didn't answer right away. The silence between us stretched like a heavy curtain. "It's been a long time," I finally said, voice calm but distant. He nodded, eyes glistening. "Too long. I wasn't sure if I should come, but Dad, he passed away last winter." The words hit me harder than I expected. My knees felt weak, but I stayed still. "You didn't tell me," I whispered. "I didn't know how," he said, shame coloring his tone. After everything that happened, I thought you wouldn't want to hear from me. I looked out the window, raindrops racing down the glass. You're right. I didn't, but I still should have known. He looked down, clutching a folded piece of paper. He left this for you. Said it was something he never got to say. My hands trembled as I took it. The envelope was old, creased, written in that same firm handwriting I'd seen 100 times before. I didn't open it, not yet. I wasn't ready. Noah hesitated. Ellie, can we talk? Just once? No fights, no blame. Just talk. I met his eyes. For the first time in years, I saw regret, real regret. I nodded slowly. Okay, but not here. We sat in a small cafe near campus, the kind with quiet music and the comforting smell of roasted beans. It felt strange, two strangers bound by the same past. He stirred his coffee endlessly, avoiding my gaze. I lost everything, you know. The house, the business, even Melissa. Turns out money disappears faster than love ever does. I listened quietly, not out of pity, but understanding. Pain teaches better than words ever can. I was angry at you, he said, because you stopped helping us. But now I realize you were never the problem. We were. We took from you because we knew you'd always give. I didn't reply. I let him speak. Sometimes silence is the only truth that matters. After a long pause, he looked at me and whispered, I'm sorry, Ellie. I really am. Tears stung my eyes, but I smiled faintly. I forgave you a long time ago, Noah. I just never got the chance to tell you. He exhaled, the kind of breath that releases years of guilt. For the first time since childhood, we weren't enemies, just siblings, broken but trying. That night, after Noah left, I finally sat down at my desk and opened the letter. The paper was fragile, his handwriting shaky but clear. Eleanor, I know I failed you. I raised you to be strong, and I punished you for it. I thought control was love, but now I see it was fear. You didn't deserve the silence I gave you. I wish I had told you how proud I was, not for your success, but for your courage. You were always the light in a house that pretended to have windows. If you can forgive me, do it not for me, but for yourself. You deserve peace. Dad. I pressed the letter to my chest, tears falling freely. Years of buried anger melted into something softer. Acceptance. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Not grand gestures, not apologies shouted across rooms, but quiet words written too late and still received with love. I whispered, Goodbye, Dad, and watched the candlelight flicker across his words, like his soul was listening. A week later, I went back to the old house for the first time in years. The walls were cracked, the paint faded, but every creak in the floor felt like a memory calling my name. In my old room, I found one of my paintings still hanging, the one I made when I was 16, a girl standing in the rain, holding a broken umbrella. I smiled, realizing how full circle it all felt. Noah joined me later, carrying boxes. I'm selling the place, he said softly. Too many ghosts. I nodded. Maybe it's time to let it rest. We stood in silence, not as enemies or strangers, but as two people finally learning how to live without hate. Months passed. Life moved quietly. One afternoon, I stood before a blank canvas, the biggest I'd ever owned. I picked up my brush and hesitated, then smiled. This painting wasn't for anyone else. Not for galleries, not for forgiveness. It was for me. I painted a woman standing on a cliff, wind in her hair, light in her eyes. Behind her, storm clouds parted to reveal a rising sun. When I finished, I signed it Eleanor Grace. My name, my truth. And as the final stroke dried, I whispered, softly but surely, I'm finally free. Months turned into seasons, and for the first time in years, life didn't feel like a battlefield. My days were full, painting, teaching, breathing, and my nights were peaceful. The nightmares had faded, replaced by dreams that didn't hurt to wake up from. One morning, the dean called me into his office. "Eleanor," he said with a warm smile, "we're expanding the program. I'd like you to head the new mentorship initiative. You've got a gift, not just for art, but for guiding people through pain." I paused, letting his words sink in. "You think I'm ready for that?" He chuckled. "You've been ready for years." That evening, I walked home beneath the soft gold of sunset. The city buzzed, but for once, I didn't feel lost in it. I passed a gallery window, and there, among the exhibits, was my painting. The one I'd titled Breathe Underwater. Someone must have submitted it without my knowledge. Yet instead of anger, I felt something else, pride. The version of me who painted that had finally found her voice. I stood there, smiling at my reflection beside the artwork. "You did it," I whispered. "You really made it out." A few weeks later, the gallery hosted a showcase. I attended, quietly, standing at the back, watching people stop and stare at Breathe Underwater. Then a man approached me. Early 40s, kind eyes, a calm presence that didn't demand attention. "You're the artist?" he asked. "Yes," I said, almost shyly. "It's beautiful," he said. "The emotion feels lived in. Like you didn't paint an image, you painted a life." I smiled softly. Maybe that's exactly what I did. He introduced himself as Daniel, a photographer who'd spent years documenting people rebuilding their lives after loss. We talked for hours about art, grief, and finding meaning again. There was no sparkly movie moment, no thunderclap of love at first sight, just quiet understanding. When the event ended, he handed me his card. "If you ever want to collaborate," he said, "I think our art speaks the same language." I watched him walk away, his silhouette fading into the crowd, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid to let someone new in. Weeks later, Daniel and I started working together. He photographed real people, survivors, dreamers, those who'd lost everything and still stood tall, and I painted from those photographs. Each story we captured felt like another piece of myself being restored. One evening, as we were setting up a shoot, Daniel looked at me and said, "You know, Eleanor, most people talk about pain like it's something to escape. You make it look like a teacher." I laughed softly. "That's because it is. Pain taught me everything that comfort never could." He nodded, eyes full of quiet admiration. "Then I hope the world learns from your lessons." As we packed up, I realized something profound. Healing wasn't a destination. It was a lifelong partnership with your scars, with your art, with yourself. A year later, our joint exhibition opened. The theme was resilience. People from all walks of life filled the room, some smiling, others crying silently in front of our work. Noah came too. He stood before one painting, his portrait, and whispered, "You really saw me, didn't you?" I nodded. "I saw who you could have been all along." Later that night, when the crowd thinned, Daniel walked over and said, "You realize this exhibition isn't just about art, right? It's your life story painted in colors." I looked around at the walls lined with pain turned beauty and felt tears rise. Then I guess I finally learned how to turn suffering into something worth showing. He smiled. "That's your real masterpiece." After the exhibition, I sat in my studio, pen in hand, writing a letter I'd never send. "Dear younger me, I know you're scared. You think love means sacrifice, that your worth depends on who accepts you. But one day, you'll learn that walking away isn't weakness, it's power. You'll lose everything you thought you needed, and in that emptiness, you'll find yourself. Keep painting even when no one's watching. Keep loving even when it hurts. Keep breathing even underwater. You'll make it out. Eleanor." When I finished, I sealed the letter in a small wooden box labeled Past. Then I opened another, newer box labeled Future. It was empty for now, but it wouldn't stay that way. Just as life felt steady, the past came knocking again, this time through a phone call from a hospital. It was my mother. She'd had a stroke. The nurse said she was asking for me. For a moment, I froze, old wounds screaming. Then I exhaled. calm but firm. Tell her I'll come. When I arrived, she looked fragile, smaller than I remembered. The woman who once ruled through fear now lay weak, her voice barely a whisper. Eleanor, she said, reaching out. I thought you hated me. I took her hand. It was cold, trembling. I did once, but hate's heavy. I've learned to travel light. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I was so wrong. I nodded, squeezing her hand. I know. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I didn't need her apology to heal, but hearing it closed a door I hadn't realized was still open. She passed away a month later, peacefully, in her sleep. I didn't cry out loud. Instead, I stood by her grave, whispering a simple prayer for both of us. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's releasing the grip of what hurt you. Noah joined me, placing a single white rose beside the stone. You think she ever really understood? He asked. Maybe not, I said. But that's okay. Understanding isn't what sets us free. Acceptance does. The wind blew softly, and for the first time, I felt no bitterness.
Just calm.
Years passed quietly. The kind of peace I once thought impossible became my everyday rhythm. My art gained recognition. My students found their voices. Daniel and I stayed close, building not just projects but trust. One evening, he said, "You've spent your life turning pain into art. Maybe now it's time to paint joy." I smiled. Maybe it's time to live it. The mentorship program grew. I watched young artists come in broken, unsure, and leave with fire in their eyes. I saw myself in them, raw, searching, but brave. During the annual exhibition, one of my students hugged me and said, "You changed my life." I smiled.
No, sweetheart.
You did that yourself. I just handed you the brush. And in her gratitude, I saw my own healing mirrored back. Years later, an old woman now, I sat in my sunlit studio, surrounded by canvases of every season of my life. My last painting wasn't of storms or sorrow or survival. It was of peace. A woman sitting by a window, painting light. When I signed my name, I felt no weight, no ache, just stillness. And as I looked out the window, the sky pink with dawn, I whispered to the universe that once tested me so hard. Thank you for breaking me. It's how I learned to shine. Then I set down the brush, my last stroke complete.